All right, I quite get that I'm between your lips and the beer, so I'll try and make it as short as possible and as interesting as possible. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask two really tough questions during the session, and if anyone gives the answer to that, I'm going to give a small reward. So we've got two of them, so let's see who gets that. Right? Now, you heard a lot about digital transformation, how that is going to create an apocalypse, and you're going to, you got to master it, and a lot has been talked about it by the leaders in the forums right from the day, from the earlier during the day. Now, what I'm going to talk about in the next 45 minutes is my personal experience of growing up as a business analyst, and during that journey, how digital or analytics has impacted how the business looks at data, looks at analytics, right? So it's a personal experience, and it's not derived out of any best practices that you could look upon from any company. It's also it's also not from any of the industrial heavyweights. It's just a personal experience. So whatever you see here is what I feel personally about what BAs should do in this digital era, right? Now, I'm going to start this with a small narration of a story that is quite interesting, but a little creepy though, because this is a story of a large multi-store, mega store retailer in US, and how they kind of leverage the data to make their customers buy more from them. Now, the story goes way back in 2012 when Mr. Charles Doug wrote an article on the Times Magazine, and the title of the blog was itself very interesting. It was How Companies Learn Your Secrets. It created a little bit of controversy during that time, but that particular article gave a perspective into what today is branded as personalization or hyper-personalization using analytics. Now, here is how the story goes. The marketing leaders of that particular retail chain approached the data scientist. They asked him, how do I make sure that the shoppers shop more with us? And how do I ensure that they buy most of what they need from us as a retailer? This was at the time when the big box retailers in US were still relevant. And they're no more relevant in today's time. But at that time, way back in 2012, they have a significant chunk of the business was done in brick and mortar stores. Now what happened was, this data scientist had a team of 2 or 3 people. They skimmed through the data, and what this particular company had was a large amount of data about customer. They had details about their credit card, details about their transactions, details about their purchasing behavior. They also had something which is called the baby register. So if there is a pregnant lady shopping, they can register with this retailer, and all the transaction related to that particular segment of customer gets recorded. So what they did was they started skimming through this baby registers and the transaction or purchase behavior of all the pregnant ladies that come to shopping to this retailer. Interestingly, what they found was that the pregnant ladies who are in the first 20 weeks buy odorless lotions. And along with that, they apparently buy cotton. Now, another set of data scientists came together and figured out, well, ladies in their trimester buy a lot of supplements like zinc, potassium, required for having a healthy baby. They put all this together. There were 25 products that they analyzed, and what they found was that if a lady in March buys cotton and a large bag that can fit a diaper, and buys a lot of supplement, and buys lotions, which are scentless, a soap that is scentless, and a blue rug, what essentially it means is this lady is, with a fair amount of accuracy, about 87% accuracy, they can predict that the lady who was shopping is going to get pregnant who's going to deliver a baby in August. And this became the basis for sending coupons, targeted coupons to these ladies. What happened was, they sent this lady, this coupon to a teenage kid. And in Minneapolis, the father of this lady came to meet the manager of the store and said, you know what you're doing? You're sending these coupons to my 16-year-old. Are you trying to encourage her to be pregnant? The manager, as nice as he could get, looked at the coupons and said, well, I'm sorry for that. It was a mistake on our end. Now, come as this company's brand is, they're kind of, little customer-centric and all that. So this manager calls back the father again and to apologize again. And when he called, the father said, well, it seems I was not quite up to date on what's happening in my family. My daughter is indeed pregnant. Right? So what this story tells us is the conscious and unconscious pattern, our purchasing pattern, gets rendered so much in the data and the algorithms that some of these companies can influence our purchasing behavior and make us buy more from them. Now, that is, in a nutshell, the transformative power of data. Now, come digital, you have the new avatar of this, which is, I'm sure all of you know, it's Amazon and Netflix. The underlying power of these e-commerce systems is data, the recommendation engine that goes into building this. It understands, it classifies the customer, it builds similarities between purchasing behavior, and it tells you exactly what you need to look. Because there is another persona just like yours who's also buying this. So there's a highly likely that you would also be interested in this. And this is the real sense of what digital data in a digital transformation can do. Just a few hours ago, there was a startup right here in this bay, which is called .in. I felt they moved the envelope a little further. If you haven't got time to go check them, please meet Ganesh Iyer there and .in. He's moved the envelope a little further than what you see here. And you might be really interested in going and watching his bay, if you haven't already. Now let's look at what happens, right? You heard a lot about digital mastery from the session this morning. If you sum it up, right, and if you try and simplify all of the conversations from morning to evening, if you notice, the whole of this digital transformation can be bucketed into 4 basic transformations. The digital transformation led by data is no different. It is used in 1, to engage with the customer. Number 2, to engage with the employees. 3, to optimize the operation. And 4, you transform the product, right? And I'm sure this is a quick summary of what we heard today. Now, what does this mean to all of you as business analysts? What should you do about this, right? Is this the doomsday for us? I've read articles written on internet saying that it is the end of business analyst by 2020, right? There's no significance to the business analyst role in the digital age. The most sought out, most paid out job is data scientist. If you're not a data scientist, then you hit the rug, right? Is that really true? Perhaps to a large extent it is. But what is the most important thing for we as business analysts should now look out for? We got to evolve ourselves, don't we, right? It's digital age, we got to evolve. And how do we evolve? I have 3 messages for the business analyst. And I say this because I've worn your shoe, I did wear your shoe 10 years ago, and I've lived the days of a business analyst through projects and through transformations. I believe that business analysts should do 3 things. They should become analytical storytellers. Number 2, they should be business focused. They should have end in mind. And number 3, they should be digitally literate. If you do this, I'm sure you're going to stay relevant. Not just relevant, you're going to stay important in this digital transformation. I'll go into the details of these three aspects in the subsequent 30 minutes. Now, this is the first aspect about analytical storytelling, right? There is the idea of data and analytics is made really complex for us to feel that, yes, that's not an area I want to get into. It's like too complex for me to deal with. But if you simplify this once again, there are basically 4 steps in the run-up to data to insight. First, there is this organizing of the data. This used to be before you started talking about digital transformation. What changed after digital transformation is the type of the data sources that started to come in. Previously, it used to be ERP, CRM system, your SCADA applications in your manufacturing. Those were the structured data, the relational databases that used to be. With the advent of digital technologies, you started using smartphones, you started using a lot of IoT devices. You have sensors on everything, and every device can now talk to each other. That's now become the new source, an additional source. The challenges have incremented, but not too much in terms of transformation. Now, the problem comes in integrating all of this, the relational data, unstructured data, your PDF file, how do you link that to your customer database? All that's still a big problem for data engineers to solve. But as a business analyst, where the focus should be is on the last mile, that is the analyzing of report and changing the behavior. Right? Gartner's 2017 report says that in spite of all these investments, the millions of dollars that these companies have invested, only 37% of the business folks really use BI reports. Rest don't even bother. Why? Because it's such a challenging thing to change the behavior based on the information or the insight that comes to them. Right? Now let's focus a little bit on what this analytical story is about, right? So when you start throwing in charts and graphs to a business guy, trust me, he does not even have the time to understand and assimilate all of that time, because either he's on the move or he's got other priorities. So what happens in the real world is that, like it or not, right, it is that somebody makes a decision and then you try to put a rationale or a justification to that decision using data. It's very rarely that you say, okay, I built this decision based on data. The data-driven decision-making is a slightly an hyped concept. Unless you have a really smart business analyst or a data scientist to help you decipher the data, find meaning in that data for the business. So that's where the relevance and the importance of business analysts comes into picture. I believe to be a very successful storyteller, you need to start to morph yourself into 3 areas, right? You need to try and be a citizen data scientist, yeah? A citizen data scientist is not exactly that you need to now go take a PhD in math and statistics. A citizen data scientist is someone who understands the domain. He understands what the data means, and he understands the basics, not the depth. He understands what is the meaning of regression, what is the meaning of classification, what is the meaning of clustering, and how do I apply in the context of the business problem that is posed to me. That is what a citizen data scientist has to do. There are also analytical platforms today where you don't have to be a data scientist or a PhD in math or statistics to do some of these analysis. A business analyst can quickly pick up some of the citizen data scientist tool in the market. There are plenty of them. UST has one which is called ICE, precisely built for this citizen data scientist to kind of leverage. If they know when do I apply classification, they can go to the citizen data science platform, input the data, get the meaning, and give it to the business. Now that's something that you have to pick. You have no choice. You have to pick that skill. That's not a choice available. It's something that you can, and there are umpteen training courses today for you to become a data scientist in a matter of months. So I think that's one thing I would recommend a business analyst to take up immediately. The second thing I would recommend is to become a data journalist. You will be amazed at how much of statistics get thrown around by these journalists on television when election comes in here, right? When even he was trying to explain some of these statistics, you don't get it because it's 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional. They speak something, the graphs is something. You don't get it. It's because one has to master the art of being a good journalist to be able to use data to and project a very complicated story, right? How do you simplify that story? So you got to start wearing the hat of a journalist and try and see how you can mine the details from the data, see what others cannot see, and start telling a story out of it, like a journalist would do, right? Third thing, which is important, is the design anthropologist. I'm sure many of you would imagine, why should a business analyst be an anthropologist? Why should he learn an anthropometric techniques, right? Why should you bother about user design and all of that? Trust me, most of the application, even in the analytics space, even if you're developing a dashboard or a mobile intelligence tool, you need to understand how that user is going to use it. You need to understand the persona of the user to be able to design a specific product that is relevant for him, for his personality, and the kind of behavior that he's expected to showcase in the job that he plays. If you don't get this, you will never be able to tell a story, and this whole exercise of analytics, data science, still remain at the level of adoption that BI has been. Yeah? Now, let's understand why this is so important to be able to understand the persona, right? When you talk about customer analytics, right, and you say, hey, I'm doing this customer analytics so that I can target my product to my consumer, right, to the who's most likely to buy this product. Why don't we adopt the same concept to the internal business users? It's also a product that's coming out of an analytics office, and the customers are your business customers, right? The same concept is true and relevant in the context of business, BI and analytics. So the reason I put customer up there at the top is because of the native need, right? Gone are days when your analytics people interface with only the internal. They build their application which interfaces with the external customers of your company. No longer it is confined to building a classic point in case was the Amazon and the same. The recommendation is built for a system of, not in system of intelligence, but system of engagement, which is that of your website or the e-commerce. So in order for you to understand how the data needs to be used, you need to understand what is the need of a customer. He wants you to know him. He wants things to be personalized. He wants to engage with him on his terms, just like Netflix does. Now, switch over into the inside of your organization. Executive. Half of the executive is not interested in the tons of data that's being poured at him. They only want to understand the significance and the conclusion and the weighted probability of whatever is gleaned inside the data. He's not interested in the details that is there. That is left to the management, who wants to understand in depth the actionability of the story. They want to understand the interrelationship so they can decipher that and communicate that intent and the context to the executive leadership, right? But go to the generalist. He needs an overview. He's not interested in all the details, right? He wants the major themes covered and through data. And the expert, you don't need to tell him a story. Give him the data, he will figure out what the meaning of the data is. And a novice, he just need to know, don't oversimplify. Just imagine you giving one single dashboard or one single report to all these users, right? You fail, and no wonder you get 37% adoption. Everything that you do in analytics and BI or in AI has to be for this targeted segment. And these targeted segments have to be told a different story, right? I go back and show one of the interesting thing, it's outside the context of the corporate world and how you exchange data and intent and insight to your business leaders. But I've got a video here which actually caught my imagination when it was actually broadcasted in BBC. And I think this is the epitome of data storytelling. This is the story. This is a video about Hans Rolling's program, which is called The Joy of Statistics, which used to be there in BBC. An interesting video. I'd like to play that.
We visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe. And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you...
So when is the last time you listened to a kind of person who talks about population, lifespan, demographic? When did you last listen to a 4-minute video on this, which rapt your attention? This is the power of storytelling. None but Hans can do it. Now, and may his soul rest in peace. I think he left the world last year. And can somebody tell me how many data points, how many vectors did he kind of demonstrate in this particular video? I've got a gift for somebody who can answer that. Please. Sorry? No. No, you said region 1, that's one vector. What is the other vector? So x-axis is what? And the y-axis? Age. Yeah, can you try?
Age, income, geography, and product, industrial product.
No. Sorry. Yeah, please. Yeah? 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 Absolutely. Thank you. All right. So this is a complex subject. Imagine you telling a story using 5 vectors. Has anybody done that in your lifespan? Have you communicated a 5 vector to your business? So your CEO or your manager or something, they would go bonkers if they see 5 vectors in a graph. This is the power of storytelling. If you become a citizen data scientist, if you become a storyteller, you're a journalist, and if you become an anthropologist, you can do a similar storytelling. And this will change your career as a business analyst. It will transform you for what is relevant in the digital age. Right? I'll go to the next slide. I'm going to give a quick sense of, hey, how did, now this great story that you talked about population. Hans, he's a veteran. Have you done this in real world? Have you done this in business? So this is a story that about which UST had done for a monitoring and tracking of offenders. There's a company that provides anklets that can be tied to your legs or your hands of offenders. You don't have to jail them. You can let loose them in the society, but you need to control their navigation, right? So we worked with a company that produced such a product, right? And I'm taking this in the context of the first 4 things that I talked about. I talked about how digital and AI can influence your product, right? Or one of the 4th one around how it can change a product design. So initially, this was a product which had hardware element, it had a middleware element, and data and analytics that go bundled as a service to the Department of Corrections in US or any other policing agency in the rest of the world. So we partnered with this company. Initially, what their product did was, it was a system of transactions. So essentially, there used to be these cops or people who are responsible for corrections. You used to look at the sheet. I don't know if it's clear enough. It used to be a single web page that had a list of all the offenders and a little bit of button here that says, okay, if this guy is breaching the geofence, then a red color comes on the website. Now, this was not actionable, right? He gets to see it, but he's not able to immediately act on it. Now, what happened with digital transformation and the idea behind that? What we did was we redesigned this. We looked at this as an anthropologist, right? We looked at it if an offender, if the Department of Correction comes to know that an offender has breached the fence, geofence, you need to immediately take action. That's how you need to think when you're an anthropologist. What do I have to do if I get this information? How do I change my behavior? What do I need to act upon, right? So what we thought through all that, and then we wore a hat of a journalist as well, and we said, well, it's nice to put that thing like this. Wouldn't it be good to put a face to it? So you know exactly who this, you can just literally say who this person is. And then we also wore the hat of a data scientist and said, this whole thing in the dimension of a map or a geospatial plotting makes a lot of sense than just looking it on a web page, right? So what we developed along with them is this particular new application interface that has a list of all the offenders in that particular region. It gives you a geo view of where the offender is moving. And in small box, I'm not sure if it's visible from out there, but what you can do is, if that person crosses the the fence that is laid out to him. You can click on this and make sure that there's a bus on the ankle that the device that is put here. So it is actionable. So here is when in the digital age, the separation of the system of intelligence and system of engagement gets blended to provide a digital product which is driven by data. So this is a commercial application of the storytelling, all this thing. So if you are an analytical storyteller, wear all these three hats. I'm sure you can conceive these kind of solutions too, right? Now, the second topic that we wanted to touch upon was a business outcome, the end in the game. So one thing that I wanted to definitely drive home with this forum is don't treat a data science project or an AI project like you would do a BI application project or an application development project. These are completely different in structuring and how you go about delivering this project. The framework that you need to look for is not your standard SDLC, which is waterfall methodology or agile methodologies. There is a methodology that has been devised in 1980s by Daimler's and a couple of other companies. They formed an SIG in 1980s and figured out, hey, how do we kind of develop a methodology for data science projects? So data science is not something which is like in just 4 years, 5 years. It just became too, people started talking about this. There was a structure for doing these kind of projects way back in 1980s. Some of the best companies have used and adopted and tested this methodology. Now, there's a long story about this in terms of business analysts. How does business analyst fit into all of in this methodology, right? The business analyst is responsible for the first piece of it, which is decoding what the business problem is and how to translate that into a data mining or a machine learning problem statement. This is where the business analyst has to come in. And if he picks up the skill to become a citizen data scientist, he will be able to do that with ease, right? The second thing that he needs to do is you get into the next stages where the data understanding comes in, right? You got a lot of data sitting around. You need to start finding out which part of the data is relevant, which is noise, right? And this process continues in any data science project. Once you understand the data and you figure out, well, this data does not help me solve the problem, you might have to go back and revisit your problem. And again comes the acumen of a business analyst. Second, you definitely will get support of a data scientist to do this. Now comes data preparation. That's the job of a data scientist or a data engineer to help you prepare. But what happens in this is a very unique element while going through this is understanding the data, understanding what's the quality of data that is there. You need to start wearing the hat again of a domain expert and tell, well, this data is unclean, or there's also a concept called feature engineering. So essentially what that means is that you're looking at a couple of variables that are relevant in terms of as an input into your algorithm. Now, if you are a data scientist and you pick the skill of understanding classification, regression, and all of that basic concept, you will know which column within a customer database is relevant for you to run a segmentation program. And you keep on improving the quality, or that's called feature engineer. You keep improving the input into the algorithm. This is also a skill that a business analyst needs to prepare or start to get acquainted with so that he can partner with the data scientist to do that job well. Finally, it is the modeling. Here, the role of business analyst is minimum. It goes into the hands of data scientist who does that. And then the evaluation starts. Now, what happens in an evaluation is there are a lot of these algorithms that can be applied to the data set to get what you want to as an answer to your questions. But there is something called loss functions. A loss function is nothing but a set of techniques that you use to validate whether the algorithm meets the expectation or solves the problem or answers the business questions that have been posed to it. A couple of them are the area under the curve. There are something like F1 scores. There is a couple of them that are there. You need to understand these terminologies. As a business analyst who's interested in doing project, you can't and shy away from not understanding this. This is very, very important for a business analyst so that he can help evaluate the model alongside the data scientist and then make sure that's deployed in the way it needs to be deployed to serve the business purpose. So this is where the data, in a nutshell, how a business analyst would look at the data science program, right? And my point is around, let's look at some of these things, right? It's not really complex. It's not as complex as it is made out to be, right? You definitely need to know, if you want to go into the inner side of these algorithms and all, yes, definitely you need a math degree, you need a statistician degree. But as a business analyst, you need to know some of these terms. What does these terms mean, right? I'm not going to go into the details because of the paucity of time. You need to understand what supervised methods are and unsupervised methods are. It's very simple, right? If a teacher is trying to give examples to the kid and tells him, it's a metaphor, all right? And says that, okay, learn these examples and based on that gives a result, right? There's a template for the results. If that scenario is extrapolated into the data world, it becomes supervised, right? You always have a target to go by to do that. But if you don't have a target to go by, just get the data and do something along with the data, unsupervised. The teacher says, hey, do whatever you want with it. I don't care, just make sure you learn, right? That's unsupervised. It's simplified, but though that's the same technique that gets applied in doing this. So for example, the classification technique, you need to definitely tell, within your data set, you have to tell what the target is going to be looking like. You have to classify it. You have to tell a person is going to fall into one group or the other. But if you look at the clustering on the other hand, which is unsupervised, you let the data go and run the machine learning algorithm and let the algorithm itself define what are the natural groups. So there is no agenda for grouping, whereas in classification, there is an agenda. I have to segment it to sell something, right? So you need to understand these basics to be able to become a successful BA in the context of data science, and AI projects, right? I'm going to show a quick example of how UST has developed a solution in the context of leveraging AI, VI in the real world. It's not a hypothetical world. Here we worked with the data with a tire company, and one of the problems that they had was, I want to improve the operational metrics of our company, because the operator's performance per se has a great bearing on the throughput of a tire company. And every hour is precious for a tire company. A typical process, a simplified process of tire company is you mix where you get the rubber and sulfur and a lot of carbon get mixed, a mix is made, a sheet is made out of it, and after that, the real process of something called building happens, where the whole latex takes the shape of a tire. After that, curation happens, vulcanization happens, which gives the threading. And these two processes are heavily dependent on the operator and on the machine. So if anybody slips through this, it becomes a great loss for a tire company in terms of not being able to produce products. The customer asks, okay, give us an operational metrics, create a dashboard. It was very convenient for us to do the old school, get the data, operational metrics that are there from SCADA, all those applications that are there in a manufacturing company, and then publish a dashboard saying that, well, the KPI for operational efficiency is X, right? But then it's not actionable. What do I do about it, right? Right? What is the point in doing a post-must analysis, right? The point was, how do we make this interactive enough, agile enough for these guys to take an action? So we did this, something called a factory plan, and each of the machine that is there for building those tires were represented in the form of a floor plan. An exact amount of time that was invested by the operator in those machines were given real-time view of it. And the picture of that details around number of tires produced, what is the total number, all those details were given in a floor plan. And imagine what somebody like a factory manager can do with this information real time, right? So this is how we could do that. And then we didn't rely solely on the SCADA. We got in the data, we kept the cameras in the factory floor. And what did we used the video we did video analytics, combined the video information that's embedded in the videos, brought it together along with the SCADA application, and then we did this video imaging, right? We were able to give their command center and expose them any area, operator area, where the operator is not present, right? Imagine this is real world application of AI, VI. And we could We could help the factory manager identify where operators are not there. Then comes the next question, right? How do I use AI, VI to identify objects within the factory floor? What we did was we ran, again, the NLP algorithms related to it, and we could identify each object in that factory floor. So what you see down there is an identification that the object down there stands. And stand 1, stand 2, and there's a person, the operator. We could identify that operator who's there near the machine. What's amazing is the fact that this particular algorithm, this particular application could identify that the operator was using a mobile phone in the factory, which means productivity loss. Right? So that is how we really apply AI, VI, and in the context of data analytics, we bring all that we talk about, analytics, AI, visual, computer visions, NLP, all together to solve a business problem. And where I was going with this is come the next aspect, which is around digital literacy. It's important to understand not only what the problem is, what are the tools available to you to solve the customer problem. It's not just a traditional tool. You as a business analyst have to be digitally literate. You have to know what are the tools and technologies at the disposal in the current age that you can exploit to solve your customer's problem. It's not just a computer interface, right? So I put a list of things that come under all that you heard about today about digital mastery and all the things that we talked about in digital. All this I just quickly summarized in terms of the maturity of those things from the past to present in 6-year horizon, right? This is just my personal view, and I don't know if this is really true. It's just my interpretation of how the world looks today. And I feel what you see in this, the circle out there is the technologies that are actively adopted by business. There are science projects that are run in lab, but these are the ones that actually gets used in the real world. And for you to be able to provide a solution as a business analyst, should be able to have a solid understanding of what is the art of possible with these kind of technologies. Because if you don't understand this, you will never be able to provide an optimum decision-making solution for your customer, right? So this is what I call the digital literacy, and in general parlance, it is also called digital awareness. And this is very much important for a business analyst. One of the things that I've often heard is, okay, BI, analytics, ultimately you render some chart, right? A chart to the business, and they try and figure out, well, okay, I get it. And half the time, well, I get it, but I can't do much about it, right? This is the answer that you get if you really talk to a business user, right? But then, if you had a digital literacy and you knew what is possible, right, you would do something like what this company, which is called the company is called ThickStat, and they have a product called Converse Site. Okay, this particular product works as if you have a digital assistant. Okay, this is no science fiction, and it uses very elementary technologies that are available to all of us in this room to build a product something like this. Have a look at this video, it's very interesting.
But Jesus, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah.
You have 55 opportunities worth $36 million with 75% probability.
What's the status on the opportunity with Gamma Industries?
Expected close date is next Friday.
Perfect.
Jason, I have an update from Melissa. She confirmed that the 3 out of those 4 orders are delivering today and the 4th one going tomorrow.
Thank you, Athena.
Goodbye, Jason. All the best.
I'm ready.
Okay, so did you get what this whole thing is about? Right? So this was real-time interaction between a digital executive assistant and a business user who's trying to have a conversation with an AI bot, trying to ask the question that would typically be asked to a report. The digital agent is being asked a question about what is my sales, what's my sales revenue? Gets into details of that as if he's actually having a conversation with an assistant, right? Now, instead of giving your managers or your business, wherever you come from, right? Instead of giving your customers or your managers reports, you could, if you're digitally literate, you will know this is possible, right? So instead of giving a report, imagine the impact that you can create in your organization if you give them an AI bot where your business managers can have a conversation and get insight into their business, right? So for that, you need to be digitally literate. You need to understand what are the technologies that would go underneath this. It's quite simple. It's just an effort that you need to make to be digitally literate, right? I'll go into another aspect. This, I did think twice before putting this together, this particular video, and I couldn't resist myself from not doing this. And the reason why I put this here is because one of the inhibition we all have is, well, AI analytics means it is the report, the interfaces, it's boring, it's like too nerdy getting out there. But in the AI world, which stretches beyond data science, right, the business analysts, to be successful, have to master the art of possible. Okay? And here is a video of something I found really interesting in the CES of 2016. This is the BMW, and I found the details of this in BMW's Group Press Club. It's a website all of you can go and check. I found this interesting video where they've brought data, they brought in a lot of information together into an IoT consumer product. This is also AI, it's also insight. This is gleamed right into a biker's helmet, right? It's a very interesting thing. Please take a look at this. This is from BMW.
What a great day.
What's up, man?
We're at the viewpoint now. I'm gonna send you a new location.
Okay, thanks, man.
how amazing is that, right? This was presented in CES 2016 in Las Vegas. It caught my imagination and just said, this is real power of analytics. This is real power of data, how it can change the way our products are built. So I've got a gift for somebody who can tell me 3 things that was displayed on the helmet's heads-up helmet, right? 3 things, 3 information that was presented. I'm sorry? Awesome, yes. Can you pass on? All right, so imagine this, right? In a traditional world, we wouldn't have even thought about, I'm sure there are a lot of creative guys here, but imagine a heads-up helmet, how important this is, right? If a flick of a second and you're on a high-speed bike, you pick up a phone, or you're trying to gauge the oil, the chances of you, getting into an eventuality is so much, right? And somebody who thought about leveraging the globe, vehicle-to-vehicle communication, thinking about bringing your map, thinking about bringing your IoT data from your IoT sensors in your bike, all that into one screen right here, so much of simplification, right? I'm sorry. No, think about this, right? He's not distracted, it's right in the face, and it's only so much of information. He's not been bombarded with data. He's just, the amount of data that is only sufficient to make certain decisions is projected there. But now if you can cover the entire things with data, yeah, he might get distracted. Oh no, this is very, I think the prototype itself is, what I was being told, and I don't know the engineering behind it, but there's an equivalent of a computer which is processed inside the helmet. It's a very lightweight helmet though, in spite of all this engineering, right? So again, it's a prototype. I don't know if this is in the market, but I'm sure it is not too far when BMW would do this. The same technology is getting applied on the cars as well. Your car will have, so if somebody is trespassing and getting in front behind of a vehicle, this particular, you could see through your window that here behind the truck there's a guy who might just jump over, right? So these technologies are available. And for us to be able to exploit this technology, us being digital literate is so much important, right? And one thing that caught my attention, and I get really psyched when people start throwing this about digital transformation and how so many jobs are going to get lost and all that. And the environment becomes, hey, will I have a job next year if all this thing comes in? And it reminded me of this story about spreadsheet. How many of you have heard this, or at least how many of you have gone through this experience? I would imagine very few in this particular age. But in 1980s, what we call digital transformation today, a similar kind of sense was brought in when spreadsheet came into picture. When Lotus 123 and Excel came into picture, people said, hey, well, now accountants will lose the job. And yes, they did lose the job. If you look at this, the bookkeepers, the accountant, and the audit clerks, right, they lost their job, right, because they didn't upskill themselves. They didn't cross-skill themselves. But when this was happening, if you look at the 2 other graphs, that was the positives, right? A bookkeeper, an accountant, or an audit clerk who upskilled himself to be an accountant or an auditor, or upskilled himself to be a manager, a management analyst, or a financial analyst, he saw fortunes. So today, in the digital era, as a business analyst, if you know what skills that you need to gain, right, and something that I've put together here, it's not like the 10 commandments of the Moses, but take a couple of straw from there. I'm sure you're going to benefit from it. And this is what I feel as I've just put 1.5 decades of my experience to quickly summarize what a business analyst should do not to get into this doomsday situation. I believe you need to be a data curator. You need to understand how do you bring all the data together. Because it's not only bringing the data. When AI becomes mainstream, the business analyst will be the people who will be called upon to train the AI systems. AI systems need training. You need to pump in a lot of data for the AI system to be intelligent, right? To augment the AI systems, the business analyst has to become a data curator. Second thing we touched upon, he needs to be a citizen data scientist. It's an easy skill. 2 months of crash course can keep you up there. And there are a lot of platforms today where digital citizen data scientists can use in the real world in your business scenarios. Data journalists, we talked upon that with Hans Rosling. We talked about design anthropologists and being a digital futurist. This is the last message, a digital futurist. To be able to develop a product like the Motorrad of BMW, you have to be a digital futurist. And for that, the digital literacy becomes paramount. And with that, I kind of close this. And I hope you had some interesting time.
Any questions for Suresh?
I think I love you for the video of BMW Motorrad helmet. It's like the dream helmet and anybody can have it. But I come back to the point wherein you say that business analysts are the next data curators. And there I have a very specific problem because as an analyst, business analyst in an enterprise, I am limited by the biases that I grow up with within the enterprise as well as the exposure that I have. So when I'm curating the data, I'm limited by the knowledge in which I have grown across. It's like basically the memory power which I have and what is the exposure that I have to. In a scenario like this where I'm trying to curate, what tips you or what suggestions you want to give to a BA as to how they should diversify themselves so that, not only for the current scenario, but something like, if I have to become a digital futurist, what are those points which I should be kept on looking at so that, I can curate that data which is good enough for the system to be accurate enough in responding back to the clients?
Sure. So again, data curation requires two things, right? You need to understand where the data lies, yeah, and rather three things. Where the data lies, what is it going to be used for, and what business problem is it getting solved. And if you are a citizen data scientist, you understand how it is going to be used to be able to put it as an input into an algorithm or a model, right? So I don't think it needs you to stretch yourself as much as you imagine, just like you would do a BI project, right? All you need to know is a broad awareness of your company. Let's say you are into telecom. You need to understand what are the possible data that is available internally, not just in the ERPs, but the dark data is very important. A dark data, by definition, is something that you would try and, it is out there, but you didn't really go and gleam into it and didn't try to make an effort. Maybe your emails, maybe your PDF documents that are there, right? So you have to be constantly looking out for these pearls of data assets in your organization. You have to be conscious also of the fact that in your industry as a telecom industry, what are the so if you're a management graduate, you have learned about something called the PEST, political, economical, social, technological. 4 things that actually influence the strategy of a company. So as a business analyst, you've got to start wearing a little bit of your strategic hat and start looking for what are these data points that I can source for all these pest-related information to be able to bring it into my organization and start making meaning out of it. So again, it comes back to how much of effort that you're putting in to know about the data and to do a little bit of homework around understanding what regression, classification, all of that is. It is possible. And it's a little bit of leap of faith in that. I think a business analyst can definitely become a data curator. It's my experience. I'm not taking out of textbook. So, please.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid that we do not have too much of time. If it is a very quick question, maybe this is the last one.
So I'll make it quick. If I were to look at 3 dimensions, we have sensors today which can actually procure or source the data. We have IoT to communicate the data, and we have deep learning to actually learn from the data. Okay, you're quite right when you say that at some point of time you need to train the AI, but the very essence of machine learning is it'll learn by itself, right? So communication, sourcing, and learning is happening by the system. If you're looking at the futurist, what will the data scientist play in the future?
So So let me clarify that. When you're saying an AI system, right, it's an adaptive learning system, all right? But you need to, it's like the garbage in, garbage out, all right? So you need to be in a position to train that algorithm, whichever, whether it's a deep learning algorithms or a typical machine learning algorithm, you need to train it with something called training data sets. To choose the training data set, and what I call, when I talk about feature engineering, that becomes very important. Only a business analyst can actually tell you which column within a data set or a table is the relevant to become a significant input into the algorithm. What happens in the industry today is perhaps you're relying too much on a data scientist to help you with that. But imagine a data scientist coming together along with the business analyst and solving the problem, right? Two heads make a better than one head. And that's where the relevance comes in for business analysts to play a role, even as a future analyst, to help the AI system be more adaptive before it becomes fully self-sufficient by itself. Sorry, did I answer that? All right, I think we're in.
Thank you, Suresh. It was a wonderful presentation, and I
Thank
think
you.
the videos were brilliant.